Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. I am getting so close to sending off the space elevator for the last time. I've had the 1000 nuclear pasta sitting around for a while now. In the last video, I automated the biochemical sculptors and AI expansion servers. Those should both be done by now, leaving me with the ballistic warp drives as the last part to automate. These are probably the most involved parts in the game, and when you want to scale them up, require a healthy amount of resources. So unfortunately, I won't be automating them in this video. One of the major parts I need are Singularity Cells. I have 16 pressure conversion cubes laying around, and today I'm going to turn all of them into more nuclear pasta, and then Singularity Cells. I don't actually need 160 per minute, which means I can add a whole bunch more portals, or I get some juicy sync points. We are going to be spending most of the time here in the Dune Desert, because this is where the 16 pressure conversion cubes are being delivered, and there's still quite a bit of copper out here. But I am getting kind of close to the end of this playthrough, and there's a handful of things that I still want to do. Before we get into the main project, let's go ahead and play some AM. I think it's time that I finally complete the entire thing. I'm still not going to use any of the switches in this playthrough, but let's go ahead and just unlock them. I know this is a really little thing, but this is one thing that I would love to see changed. I hate that it just gets cut off just by a little bit. Like, I wish I could move this menu or something so I could actually see my to-do list when I have other menus open. Thankfully, I can still figure out what's over here, but it would be really nice if I could actually just see the whole thing. Let's knock these out.
Fix it. It's fun to have power.
It is fun to have power. Last but not least, nuclear deterrent development. While I'm waiting for this to refill, let me take you on a little trip over here. I am happy to say this power plant is running very smoothly now. But that isn't to say that we didn't have a little hiccup a video or two ago. And, well, it left me with some extras. We come over here, I've got 3,600 of the encased uranium cells, and 1,000 extra plutonium waste. I don't want to just have a container laying around with these just sitting here. So eventually I am going to process these and turn them into fixonium. But to do that, I need more singularity cells, so that'll probably happen in the next video. I also don't want to leave these laying around, and I happen to need 10 of them for this.
You probably should not use this. I am not joking. No refunds available. Side effects include glowing, growing extra limbs, liquefied skin, unexpected cravings for flesh, itching scalp, hair loss, finger loss, loss in general, indigestion, and flatulence. Please consult your weapons manufacturing facility if symptoms persist beyond the half-life of uranium-238.
I was curious, so I just did a quick Google search. The half-life of uranium-238, for those that aren't sure like me, is 4.5 billion years. I hope those symptoms don't last that long. And now, it's time for another temporary setup. I need the manufacturer, and I am going to turn all of those encased uranium cells into Nuke Obelisk. So this turned out into a little happy accident. Obviously, we'll overclock and might as well get as much bang for my buck. Get it? We've got these. I just need to dump the Noblest, Smokeless Powder, and AI limiters into 3 more containers. Now, Nobelisks I have automated. Same with the AI limiters. Smokeless Powder, I don't normally have a use for it unless I'm hand feeding a machine. So this is not automated. And I only have 300, which won't get me through this entire container, unfortunately. Well, we'll just set up a small container and the dimensional storage. Not sure exactly how many this is going to make. I could do the math, but I'm just going to be lazy. There we go. So I'll get this running, and then I need to create some more smokeless powder just for now. And if we take a look, there is only one recipe for smokeless powder. Black powder, heavy oil residue. No oil in the desert, but the Spire Coast isn't too far away. And then black powder. There is an alternate, but I'm pretty sure you still need the exact same thing. Coal and sulfur. We come up to the cliffs all the way up here. We've got a nice view of the Dune Desert, and right over here, the Spire Coast. And if we drop down a little bit, there's a free oil node. And right over here is some sulfur. Unfortunately, the coal is a bit of a journey. I could grab some coal from down there, or I have a much sillier idea. Hold on. I could have gone all the way down there and gotten the coal, but why do that when I can have a ridiculous setup using the SAM right over here? It's temporary. I only need enough smokeless powder to make all of my nuke obelisks, and then this is going to get deleted. It is not staying. We've got the miner that's going to crank out the SAM. Just need one constructor to create the reanimated SAM, and that's going to head on over here. And then we've got the first constructor is going to take the reanimated SAM and some of the sulfur, turn it into limestone. The second one here is then going to take more reanimated SAM and take that limestone and turn it into coal. And then we take the coal and then the sulfur, and we've got our black powder. And then that black powder is going to drop all the way down here. Do you love my infinite lifts? And then head this way. And it heads into this refinery, which is going to take the black powder and the heavy oil residue, which I already have turned on. Oh, I think I should probably do something with that resin. Almost forgot about that. There we go. Now it'll be able to continue to run. And on this side, we just need to do the same thing, where I just need a small storage container and a dimensional depot. I just gotta turn this on and I'll have all the smokeless powder I can use. And just like that, I've got my smokeless powder. While I wait for my smokeless powder to build up a little bit more so I can refill the temporary setup I have to make some more nukes, I've got another side project I'm gonna work on. This next factory is going to use a healthy amount of concrete because instead of just a super tall vertical tower, I'm going to go ahead and take up a good amount of space, which means I'm going to need a lot of foundations. My current concrete production was probably going to be fine, but I also just can't think of a reason not to fully utilize this node. That was always the plan. As you can see, this is a pure node and I am getting the full 1200 out of here now. And if we come inside, we can see it's finally all full. When I first built this, it just looked really awkward only having one refinery and everything over here just off on one side. But now that I'm at the very end of the game, it finally looks the way it's supposed to, almost 500 hours later. All I needed was one more splitter here, and then I just needed to double the setup, so add 2 more refineries. And then 4 of my 4 storage and 4 dimensional depot blueprint. Once these fill up, I've got my overflow. Those will all join up over here and then head off into the sink. Each one of these refineries intakes 300 limestone, 250 water, and it creates 200 concrete. So now I've got a production of 800 concrete, and each one of those are going to 4 dimensional depots. So I've got a total of 16 dimensional depots, and each one is maxed out. They transfer 240 items per minute. My dimensional depot will now refill at almost 4,000 concrete per minute. I think that'll do. Out of the entire world, I think this is the only factory that I built with expansion in mind, and it paid off. Now that I've got this out of the way, my concrete will refill twice as fast. I'm going to go back to the Dune Desert and place down a whole bunch of foundations to get started. We'll go over the plan, and then we'll start laying down some machines. There is quite a bit of open space here in the Dune Desert, and it's relatively flat. Even if I wanted it to take up a space where a bunch of these nodes are, it wouldn't be hard to just build right over the miners. But the most scenic part of the desert is definitely the waterfall, so I wanted to build it right here. I am probably not going to leave it jagged like this. I'll smooth it out and do a diagonal line across here, but for right now, that'll do. Just need the basics just to kind of get an idea of how much space I have to work with. I have very few factories left to build, so I can really just take up as much space as I want. Here is the spreadsheet. Let's take a look at the plan. Part of the reason this factory took so long to build, I just made so many mistakes building this. Thankfully, none of them are too drastic, and they pretty much revolved around how many resources I actually had around here. So that was just 100% on me. So I'll explain a little bit of it here, but instead of taking you through all of the mistakes I made, I think that's going to end up making everything really complicated because there's just going to be so many numbers that end up changing. I'm just going to take you through the correct way to build it, and I'll probably highlight things that I got wrong here and there. To make singularity cells, you need a ton of concrete, a pretty healthy amount of iron plates, dark matter crystals, and just a handful of nuclear pasta. I already have the pressure conversion cubes for the pasta, so I just need an absolute ton of copper powder. Even though I have dark matter crystal being made at a whole bunch of different factories right now, and more than enough for this factory, I am actually just going to be making the dark matter crystals here, which means I'll need to make some more time crystals and a whole bunch of dark matter residue, but that only requires SAM. When I need a ton of iron plates, I love the coated iron plate recipe. I still need 800 iron ingots, which isn't nothing, but I only need 160 plastic. So this is where most of the mistakes came in. I thought it would be fun to use a couple different recipes here. And the one that probably stands out, and the one you're wondering about, is why in the world did I use the leach copper ingot recipe? Because when you look at the different ways to make copper, the pure copper ingot will actually give you a better ratio for ore to actual ingots. The leach copper is close, but it actually doesn't give you quite as much. And I do honestly hope that at some point it at least gives you an equal amount. I think that would be fair for using sulfur. But the trade-off is, for using sulfur, you get away with using a lot less refineries. With the pure copper recipe, you only use 15 copper ore per machine per minute. Whereas with this one, goes through 3 times as much. Meaning I need 3 times less refineries for that stage. Now, I do need more refineries to make the sulfuric acid, but even with those added, I'm still using half or even less than half. You don't get quite as good of a return, but you do get to cut down on the amount of machines by quite a bit. There's a decent amount of sulfur. I've never used this recipe. I thought it would be fun. And so that's where one of the mistakes happened. I forgot about 300 sulfur, so when I added that to the math, then it changed the amount of refineries and the amount of foundries I needed. So it was just mistakes like that I made, where I got the amounts wrong. Thankfully, I had tons of space in the factory, so it ended up just deleting blueprints and, placing new ones and redoing some stuff. It wasn't the end of the world, but I did end up having to rebuild a number of things a few times. I need 3,200 concrete, so the wet concrete is the obvious choice for that. For the time crystals, I'll be heading back out to the Spire Coast and using up pretty much all of the rest of the oil available out there, but I don't need to go anywhere else. I can make all the rest of the time crystals I need in that one spot. I have enough copper here in the Dune Desert to make most of the copper powder I need, but not all of it. I am going to need to bring in a little bit more. And if you ever run into this situation, I highly recommend just turning it into copper powder and then transporting it instead of transporting the ingots. It'll be much easier. With the overview of the plan out of the way, let's start building some machines. At this point, I've made a whole bunch of different blueprints for machines, and so I was able to take some existing ones and just modify them slightly. I'm going to need 16 refineries in total for the wet concrete, so let's go ahead and place the first one. And put it in blueprint mode, and just spam down 3 more. This should look pretty familiar. Completely overclocked, 300 limestone, 250 water, and 200 concrete. I need to plug a pipe of 500 water into each one of these junctions. So there's 8 in total. So 300, 300, that'll be 600. So 2 600 lines. Each one of these blueprints needs a 1200 line of limestone to be plugged in. That's pretty much it. I'll still need to get things grouped together. I haven't done that part yet. Each machine outputs 200, which is fantastic. So I can either leave them in groups of 4, and I can do belts of 800 if I want 4 belts. Or I could do 2 belts of 1200, and then the last belt would be 800. So I've got options. So I'm going to leave that part till later. Let's move on to placing more machines for now. Next up, sulfuric acid. Gonna nudge this over so I basically have one foundation as a gap in between the two. And it just puts these in more convenient places on the foundations. So now the ladder is right in the middle of the foundation, so they'll be all lined up. It just looks better when all the machines are nice and lined up. I need 21 in total, so I need 7 of these blueprints. It's a good thing I built that right on the water's edge, and I've got a bit of room before I run into the train line. When I had forgotten about the 300 sulfur, that was enough space, but the correct amount of machines is 21 for this. Each refinery is overclocked to 200%, which gives me real even numbers to work with. 100 sulfur, 100 water, gives me 100 sulfuric acid. And then next up, all of that sulfuric acid is going to go into this blueprint right here. Let me just place one so we can go through it. So the way this is designed is each one of these blueprints is going to be fed by 2 of these refineries. Like we just said, each one of these is going to output 100 sulfuric acid, and each one of these refineries needs 50. So that's why 2 refineries are paired up together, and then each refinery needs 90 ore, and it'll give me 220 copper ingots. So thankfully at 200%, I still get really even numbers to work with. My goal with setting it up this way was just to make the sulfuric acid really easy. I can figure out the load balancing for the copper. I've got plenty of room underneath to do any of the load balancing I need. With each of these refineries outputting 220 copper ingots, that's going to get grouped together and go into one constructor. And this is where the nice even numbers end. So 440 copper ingots becomes 73 and a third copper powder. But because of the amount that I need, I'll end up with nice even numbers. I want to give myself plenty of space. Thankfully, the concrete really shouldn't take too much space to get out of here. And then with the sulfuric acid, I'll have plenty of space to move all of those pipes around. And then I'll just do the load balancing for the copper right above it. So let's see how many we can fit in here. So that's 8, but I'm also going to need to get a bunch of these pipes around because, yeah, we can go ahead and get rid of that one, I think. I need 42 of these refineries in total. I've just placed 28, so I need 14 more. And the way I'm going to do these, I can line these up with that first row. So hopefully some of those pipes will line up pretty nicely, and then we'll try to give myself enough of a gap here. 4, 8, 12, and then I'm just going to go ahead and place one more, and then we're just going to delete half the blueprint. And that's the 42 refineries I need that will produce 9,240 copper ingots, which then get turned into 1,540 copper powder. Thankfully, a lot of this belt work is going to be pretty easy. I just need to connect these. And if I had left just a little bit hanging out in one of the blueprints, then I could have used the auto connect feature, but I don't really mind. And then a lot of this floor is just going to end up being taken up by a whole bunch of pipes going all the way across. And then I'm just going to do the load balancing for the copper right above. Since each machine needs 90, this should be pretty easy. And they're already grouped in pairs. And all of the nodes are either going to be 300, 600, or 1200. So it'll be pretty easy to get them into groups of 900. And then I can bring up 900 and then just do a 5-way split. And then at the end of each 5-way split, it gets split in half. And yeah, that should work out pretty well. But let's go ahead and place some more machines first. This right here uses up all of the sulfur and all of the copper that I can pair up with that. But for the rest of the copper available in the desert, I'm going to go with Old Faithful. I was able to modify my 4 foundry blueprint. Just added some constructors to the very end so that I can immediately take the ingots and turn it right into copper powder. This I need 32 foundries, so we're going to do 4 sets of this blueprint right here. Well, preferably not stacked on top of each other. And then a second row. And for right now, it's overhanging, but once I connect all of this, I guess I can at least fill this in. There we go. Now it's not floating. I could have actually used fewer machines, but placing 32 just made all the load balancing belt work a whole lot easier. But even though this doesn't look like a fantastic number, 97.5. Every pair needs 195. Every blueprint needs 390. So 390 of both copper and iron need to plug into these splitters. And if I join up two blueprints, they each need a full 780 belt. So I think that should be easy enough to do. I'm just going to pair up two blueprints at a time. I'll do my load balancing down below. I basically just need 4 belts of 780 for both iron and copper, and that will produce 1040 copper powder. And because that amount will all fit on one belt, I think I'm going to group this line all the way this way. And then it's going to curl back around and merge up with these ones. And out of this merger, I'll have my 1040 copper powder. I'll probably need to do some rebalancing, but since we are just right on top of the logistic floor, that'll be easy enough to do. I do have a little bit more free space on this floor, and there's one last thing I can put in here. I need 800 iron ingots, so for that I only need 12 smelters. That's 3 of this blueprint. With them already grouped in sets of 4, and having 3 of them, that just means I need 1 splitter there, and then 1 merger there. Input 800 iron ore, and I'll get 800 iron ingots out. And that is all of the machines I need for the first floor. Normally, I would add the second floor, and then we would go through the rest of the machines. But this is where I realized that I really needed to take better inventory of what was around here. I do have a radar tower out here, but it doesn't give me complete coverage, and, well, like I've already mentioned, I didn't do my best at adding things up. So that is where I kind of take a pivot, and I am going to gather up all of the ore to make sure that I have what I need. And thankfully, there's quite a bit that's close. We've got limestone, iron, there's some copper here. If we come over here, there's limestone there, there's limestone behind these rocks, there's another copper over here. But if we take a look at the map, I'm right here, on the other side of the desert really. I need this sulfur, I'm gonna need both of these copper, probably not all of the limestone, but probably some of it. And that is all basically by that lake, and I think that's just a bit farther than I want to belt it. I went ahead and just paved the entire underside of the factory. It's going to be a lot easier to work with having foundations placed on everything. So now all of the sand is covered up and I've got lots of usable space down here. There's miners placed on all of these. The factory itself covers quite a few of these. I'm bringing in 1200 limestone. There's 2 normal nodes, one from here and then one a little ways behind there. There's an impure node here. Normal iron node just right outside. This is copper like I mentioned before. And then back in here right underneath the train tracks we've got the second limestone that's getting paired up with that first one to make the 1200. We've got this copper node. And then over here we've got a couple more nodes. I'm grouping that copper and limestone node together. They're being brought into the train station, and then that and that copper and anything else coming from over here is going to get grouped together. Once it's here, I'll probably use a smart splitter and join up the 2 copper lines so that I can just have a full 1200 line. And then those will go from the train station over to the factory. So for the iron, I can leave those to last. There's just so many around here. Oh yeah, and there's one other copper, and I grabbed the iron node because it was right next to it, and that way I could make it a full Mark 6 belt. So from way over there, this is the longest belt that I decided to make. I didn't really want to make a train just for the one node, so I'm grabbing that normal node and that normal iron node. Those get grouped together and underneath the train and into the factory. For the rest of it, we head out here. 2 normal copper nodes get grouped together. That makes a 1200 belt. Right alongside another limestone. And those head right into my new train station. I'm also grabbing that pure limestone from over there. This copper node. The limestone node way back there. This limestone node. And then that copper node down there. So if we come inside here, nothing too fancy. I went with using mainly foundations for the walls and then just the frame walls instead of using actual windows. But if we go underneath, I have arranged it so each one of the 5 freight cars should be completely full with the 1200 ore. So this train is going to be moving 6,000 ore per minute. And since it only has to go from here to there, I think it should have enough time to be able to do it. 32 stacks divided by 12. It needs to be able to complete a round trip in 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and about a minute of that is going to be taken up by the docking and undocking. But it's such a short trip, it should be fine, right? Right? Now I just need to create that rail line to go from here to there. And I do want to make sure that it's, more or less as short as possible. So I think I'm going to have it cut through here. And then instead of going to the main train station, I think I'm just going to set up a separate train station just for this. And it'll just be a push-pull from that train station to the other one to pick up the ore. And I think once we get down to this level, I've got plenty of space. So I can place a train station out here. And then, yeah, I think that'll work. Just need 5 freight cars on this side. Now just a short train line from here to there, and try to avoid any of these nodes just in case I do need to use them. So give me just a second and I'll show you what it looks like. And we're back. Here's the train station. For most of these, it's beautiful. Gotta love moving 1200 parts per minute. I do have to make sure that I use both of these because I need to be able to offload faster than the 1200 to make up for that 30 seconds that the belts are going to be paused during the docking animation. But from there, I just need one belt out and no balancing required. Doesn't get any easier than that. So we've got 2400 copper here, 2400 limestone, and then the very last one is split. It's 1 normal copper and 1 normal sulfur. It's still transporting 1200 parts per minute, but since it's split between 2 different parts, I need to make sure that I am using both of the outputs. I've got a smart splitter set on both of these to send sulfur to the right, copper to the left. But because down here, I am going to have to do a little bit more load balancing, not a lot, thankfully. We just need the splitter. We take 780 with the Mark V belt, and then if we send back 120 on a Mark II, and 60 on a Mark 1, that would be 180, leaving me with 600 out of that output. And I could make this a priority merger and then also make this Mark 6. And I think the priority mergers work well 99% of the time. I do think that there are some times where they're just not quite perfect. To make things easier, if we've got the 780 and I'm sending back 180, that's still not the full 1200 belt. So this should never have any issues. And having both the Mark 6 and a Mark 5 is still plenty enough to make up for that 30-second pause. Now we can follow this rail line all the way back. And here we are. Pretty short rail line, but I do love the trains and I love seeing them running all over the place. So I much prefer doing this than having the really long belts go from one end of the desert to the other. But when I was building the rail line, I noticed a node that I forgot about. And you may have noticed it while I kind of flew over the area. This one, it was just kind of tucked away and hidden right behind this support. There is one last copper node that I was able to grab. And of course, this is another one of those things that screwed up my numbers. I had to rebuild the amount of foundries and all that jazz. But that's okay. I now have all of the copper in the desert. I could have sent this over to the train station, but right now all of those freight cars are exactly the same at 1200 per minute. Even though it's a really short trip and I could just have it go back and forth, and the timing is probably going to be somewhat tight anyways, I want to have the train set to leave when it's fully loaded. And that really works best if all of the freight cars are getting the exact same amount. With this built right next to the train line, I figured I might as well just use the existing infrastructure, even though I didn't really intend for it to be used like this. I was able to just fake some wall holes and just use the foundations here. And these make their way all the way back to the factory. Now I have pretty much all the ore that I need from the desert. I need to go through and make sure that I have enough iron, but I know there's plenty in the desert and I'm not too worried about that. I haven't ran power over to the factory yet, and I'm going to be using the rail line to power all of this stuff out here. Normally, I would like to turn this on now and make sure that the throughput's good and there's just no issues. But it's a pretty short trip. Surely, I'm not going to have any issues. We'll just test that later. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and add the second floor, and we can start building the rest of the machines. I've grabbed a couple more of the nearby iron nodes, and in fact, I think I may have grabbed a couple too many, so I may actually be able to delete a couple of those. And we have the second floor. I decided to switch it up, and I went with the coated concrete and the good old copper finish. And we're going to start with the MAM here. Slowly making my way through all of the hard drives that I have. And if we go to the hard drive library, there is just one left. Although it says I can rescan, so that might actually mean that there's one more. Does that mean I can scan one? Oh, I can. Okay, so I take it back. We'll go ahead and select this one. Now there's one last one that I'll be able to select in 10 minutes. And then I will have all of the alternate recipes. This floor is going to have pretty much all of the big machines. I need a set of particle accelerators for the pasta, another set for the dark matter crystals. I need converters to make dark matter residue, and then the singularity cells are actually made in the manufacturer. The way I'm going to lay this out, because this is kind of the biggest area back here, is this is going to have all of the particle accelerators. This edge right here is going to have the manufacturers for the final product. And then in the middle is where I'll squeeze in the last couple things that I need. And I'm going to start with the manufacturers because that will kind of dictate how far it goes and how far down I can place the particle accelerators. They're pretty big and I do need a few of them, but I don't think I actually need all of this space. So if I can bring them in a little bit and cut off some of the very edge, that would be nice. So I'm going to start back here with the manufacturers. Give myself plenty of space on the side, and yeah, I won't need a lot, so that'll be fine back here. And I'll start with my manufacturer on the right. Now I can put it in blueprint mode, and instead of using my ones that are with a center and they have the splitters attached to it, since I only need 8, it'll be easiest if I just alternate my right and left. So we'll get these spaced out so that each one can take up 3 foundations. There's all 8 manufacturers. You can set these for singularity cells, and each one is going to be overclocked to 200%. Those are convenient numbers to work with, especially because down below, each of those refineries are outputting 200 concrete each, and everything else is just going to be really even numbers. For this, it'll be pretty easy. So the very first stack will have all 4 splitters, because it needs 400 concrete, and then it's 200 iron plates for each one. And then both the dark matter residue and the pasta can just fit on Mark 1 belts. We'll have a stack of these splitters in between all of these pairs. And then for the next row, I'm going to place all 4. And that'll join up those 2 and these 2. But I'm actually going to delete the very bottom one, because that's where the concrete will plug in. Each of these splitters needs 800 concrete. And then there's a final stack that'll be right in the very center, and that will go right here. And for this one, I'm going to delete bottom 2. There's 1600 iron plates in total, and so that is where 800 iron plates will get plugged in on either side. But then all of the dark matter crystals and the nuclear pasta can get plugged into here. There we go. Now they're all belted up, and just in time for the MAM. Now, the final recipe, the tempered Caterium ingot. Alright, now I am all done with hard drives. Nice to have that out of the way and just have them all available. Alright, so since I'm working my way backwards, one thing that I can fit real close to make things a little bit easier. For the iron plates, I need 9 assemblers. Make sure to give myself enough room right through here, but Don't need them too far away. So we'll put the first set of 3 here. And I've got plenty of space, so we can space these out a little bit. We'll get the other set of 3 here. And then the last one over here. Good old coated iron plate. One of my favorites. 1,600 iron plates out of only 9 machines. So 177.7 repeating. And the load balancing for this is going to be pretty easy. I just need one more set of splitters right in front to join up all 3 of these blueprints. And then as far as the output goes, I have 9 machines and I need to split it in between 2 equal belts. So the way I'll do that is just keep it pretty simple. We're just going to put a splitter right here in the middle. And then just mergers going out from there. And then the very last one will then go into that splitter. Going to be a Mark III out of all of the machines. And since each one is going to end up with 800, I'll just use Mark VI for this. Grab old Stubby and just cycle till I find the right one. And there's the iron plates taken care of. Now I just need particle accelerators and converters. For the dark matter crystals, I'm only going to be using 6 converters and 3 particle accelerators, so that doesn't take up too much space. It's the nuclear pasta that takes up way more, because for that I need 16 particle accelerators. This section is 42 foundations long, or wide. So this right here is my middle point. These things are pretty big, so I think it'll be easiest to do 2 rows of 8 to get my 16. So that means I want to put 4 on one half and then the 4 on the other half. So we're just going to work with the very center here. We can bring it back a little bit. Alright, let's place the first one. Set the recipe for the pasta. And I think these are all just overclocked. 200%. Yep, nice and even numbers this way. And hopefully I can space these out my usual 3 meters each. Not a lot of extra space, so I may end up just slamming all of these next to each other. We'll see. For right now, we'll space them out. Out of all of the things, it's quick wire that refills the slowest. Not something I usually go through a ton of all of it once. I could increase the upload speed, but I can just wait a couple minutes and then I'll be able to fill that in. So I just need a second row, and the second row I am going to spin this around so that all of the inputs are facing each other. And that way it'll make it really easy to load balance the pressure conversion cubes across all of the machines, because I'm load balancing the 16 across all 16 machines. The copper powder, however, this is going through 3200 copper powder. So that's going to come in realistically probably 4 belts. I just need a couple of minutes for my dimensional depot to refill the quick wire. But up here, we're going to place just 3 particle accelerators and then a couple of converters. Since I only need 3 of the particle accelerators for this side, I think I can get this lined up with the very center. And these ones are doing the dark matter trap. 320 divided by 3, 106 and 2/3. And these ones can be purple. Might play around with how I'm going to space these out exactly, but in front of each of these particle accelerators, I just need 2 converters. These are going to be doing the dark matter residue. In total, I need 800. I'm going to be using 6 machines, so let's see if these numbers match up. So 133 and a third, so that would be 266.66. There we go. So that's the amount that I need. And then the time crystals are thankfully just 1 splitter. That'll just split them across all 3 machines. Just 1 junction here. Put these in straight mode, and then I can go from here to here. Let's make these chrome. There we go. So that'll be pretty easy. And then I just need to load balance the reanimated SAM across 6 converters. I just need to place a few more particle accelerators, and then, well, all of the numbers of machines are pretty easy. So the belt and pipe work won't be too complicated. And yeah, it was pretty straightforward. The very middle belt will have the pressure conversion cube, so that comes to this point and then gets split in half, and then gets load balanced across on 8 machines on either side. with each particle accelerator needing 200 of the copper powder. I have 4 of them grouped up together, so each one of these Mark 6 belts will have 800 of the powder on it. For the output, all of them are going to get grouped together and go on a little journey all the way to this side. And then once it gets to this point, all of the ones from that side are also going to get grouped all the way to here. All 16 will then head on over to here and get load balanced to the manufacturers. And then the dark matter crystals are just coming from this belt right over here. Singularity cells really aren't the most complicated pieces to make. Assuming you already have the pressure conversion cubes made, it makes the rest of it pretty easy. You just need a lot of resources. Now that I've got all of these machines in place and the basic belt work is done, I want to start placing the few other machines that I need. As I mentioned in the beginning, not everything is being made right here. I still need a good amount of time crystals, reanimated SAM, and a little bit more copper powder. I've made all of the nuke nobelisks I can, so I'm completely done with this mess and I can delete all of it. And that's going to lead me to the next project, which is out here in the Spire Coast. Time to use most of the oil. I started to get a little ahead of myself. Before I can get to the time crystals, I do need to make sure that I'm bringing that sulfur and the reanimated SAM down there, because I need both of those. Everything from the smokeless powder setup is deleted, and now I've got my sulfur that is being grabbed right here and going into the train station. And thankfully, I already had grabbing these in mind, so all of the freight platforms are set. I just needed to create my little unload balancers down there, and you can just barely see the end of them. The numbers we're dealing with here are really easy, so you've seen those balancers before. But that SAM is unfortunately coming from the other side of this little canyon, and so I played around with a couple different ways of getting it from this side to this side. I tried having it go just straight across and giving it different kinds of supports. It just looked funny because it's only one belt. I didn't want to make it just super massive, which is kind of what it felt like it needed to be to span that gap. So instead, I just dropped it down. And that way I could use my normal supports for a lot longer, and then I just have it go back up. So it uses a bit more materials than if I were to just go straight across. But out of all the different styles I tried, I think this one looks the best. So I'm happy with this. I'll be getting 600 SAM out of this Mark III miner. That'll be going into 2 constructors that are fully overclocked. They'll turn 300 SAM into 75, so I'll have 150 on this belt, and that heads into the train station. And I think I just need to make this one connection, and it should get this all started. I've already got these synced down below, so as soon as these start getting put on the train, they'll go through their balancer and just start syncing for now. I'm always curious, do most people actually get good use of the geothermal, or do you just completely forget them like me because they fluctuate? You like the real flat power graph and you just almost never use them. I have a feeling I'm not alone, but I'm sure a lot of you better utilize the free power available on the map. So that is the last 1200 sulfur that I was counting on using, and then there's 150 out of the 400 reanimated SAM that I need. So that's a good start. Now I can focus on the Spire Coast. I'm going to go through and place the oil extractors on all of the nodes that I need and some of the foundations, and we'll go from there. Thankfully, the Spire Coast has a ton of crude oil. Unfortunately, it's kind of spread out. There's 2 impure nodes up here, so I'm going to combine those together and they'll go into 1 blueprint. There's a normal node down here, and so that will get 1 blueprint. Over there, I've got 1 normal and 2 impure. And then way on the very other side of the map, I don't think we can see any of it, there's another normal and 2 impure, although I don't need all of those ones. And when I say blueprint, I mean the same one that I've already used right over there, which is 1 particle accelerator going into 2 converters. So if we just place this here, we can go through it real quick. That'll take 300 crude oil. So either 1 normal or right above here is going to be the 2 impure nodes that I'll join up together. That'll create 60 diamonds, and then each converter will take half, so 30 diamonds, and turn them into 15 time crystals. The simplicity of these recipes is definitely a huge advantage over having to grab just tons of coal and either limestone or quartz or anything else. For every 300 crude oil, I just need one of these blueprints. So for spots like this where it's 2 impures, all I need is 1 junction. I'll just join up the 2 pipes, and it'll be clean and easy. So just give me a second and I'll get all these machines in place. And now I've got all the machines in. So just 2 more sets of blueprints over here, and then 2 last sets all the way over here. This one, however, is only overclocked to 100 instead of the full 150, because that's all I need. Particle accelerator will handle the 100, only need this particle accelerator at 50%, and then obviously only need 1 converter. And this is the last crude oil node left in the Spire Coast. I have used all of the oil to make time crystals. The crude oil by far and away makes up the majority of the resources in the Spire Coast. It isn't all of them. There's actually a couple more nodes of other materials. There happens to be a pure node of SAM. I could get the full 1200 SAM out of here, but I actually don't need that much for this. This miner is only clocked to 1000. And then each of the constructors are overclocked, so each one will take in 250, so a quarter of it, and it'll give me 62.5 for a grand total of 250. And with the 150 that I'm getting from that SAM node, that's the 400 reanimated SAM that I need. And that should be all of the SAM I need to deal with for the rest of the playthrough, I think. Alright, well, I've gathered up all of the resources. Unfortunately, they are really spread out. So my plan is to put a train station in this area, and that's going to be the main one for this area, and the spot that I'll finally put a portal out here, because there's enough going on. I think it warrants having a portal out here. But with these time crystals and the reanimated SAM being so spread out, I think I'm going to place a second train station right here. And this train is just going to go from here to the other train station, and then that main one is going to be the one that hooks up to the main train line. It's definitely a choice, because what I definitely could do is just make both of the train stations available and have the one train that I need to come out here just stop at both. There really isn't a whole lot of traffic out here, so I think that would probably be fine. But going about it this way gives me an excuse to do something kind of silly. Please hold. And we're back. Obviously, couldn't have a new factory without Bean coming and checking it out. Not sure if he's stuck on the stairs or he's just taking a break. So here is my new train station. So this is the main one. And I went and decorated these pretty much in the exact same fashion that I had over there to try to keep things consistent. So basically the entire Spire Coast looks just like this, where I have an oil extractor leading into a particle accelerator and some converters. For all of these nearby ones, they just go on short journeys over to the train station. So that one merges up with this one here, and then they head on into the train station. And then those 2 sets of blueprints get merged together, and those time crystals just come over this way, right next to the train line and into this train station. And then the portal ended up being outside, and that totally wasn't because I just forgot to add it and didn't want to try to squeeze it in there. For being a complete afterthought, I think it came out alright. Let's go ahead and hop in this train, which will take us to the other side of the Spire Coast. This right here was the silly thing I was talking about. Buckle up. And here we are at the other new train station. So that was my silly idea. I had seen other people do it before, so definitely wasn't an original idea. But I wanted my physics-defying train to go from one side to the other. Like, something tells me if you slightly submerge the train, it shouldn't actually be able to go at top speed. But that's why we love video games. So this is just a new blueprint that I made using a bunch of the rounded foundations and some beams and some lights. And that way it looks like they're kind of like floating supports. I thought it would be a fun idea. And that's usually the only excuse I need. This train station is picking up both the reanimated SAM and the time crystals from over here. And then it's just going to run to the other train station and transfer it to the main line. And that's where the train that's coming from the Dune Desert is going to come and pick everything up. So this does have the advantage of making things simpler on the main train that's going back and forth between biomes, which I do think is nice. But it was mainly because I wanted my slightly submerged rail line. The main train station connects to the main rail line from this same offshoot that the other train kind of branches off from, because there's only one train that goes to that train station. So now there's two that share this little bit of track, and then one splits off right, one splits off left. So the train will stop there, pick up all the time crystals and reanimated SAM, and then it can join up to either direction on the main line here. Because these two junctions are so close together, trains are just going to slow down because I'm using the pass signals, and those just kind of stay red until you trigger them. So that part is kind of unfortunate. There's definitely a better way to set up all of this right here, but thankfully there's only two trains that come here, and each one of them are probably only going to show up once every 10 minutes or more. So traffic really shouldn't be an issue on this side of the map. Now I just have a little bit more busy work. I need to hop in my train and go back to the Dune Desert so that I can link up the two portals. And then I'll create my unload balancer on that way so that I can get all of this turned on and turn the train on. But that's all pretty basic, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip through that, which leaves me with one last project, the remaining copper powder I need. Because I'm right over here, and I just feel like it would be fitting. For this final project, we are just going to head right over here, back to my original starting location, where there is no signs of my starter base anymore. But this right here is where the playthrough started, which happens to have 2 pure copper nodes, and I only need 1,860 of both copper and iron. So thankfully, there's plenty of it. First, I'm going to get the portal working and get the Spire Coast up and running and get those syncing, and that way I can test the throughput and make sure that train doesn't have any issues. Then I'll build a train station and a little factory over here that will produce the remaining 620 copper powder that I need. The Spire Coast is now completely up and running. I have turned all of this oil into diamonds. And then time crystals, but diamonds just sound cooler. And over here, I've got all of my miners placed. The northern forest can be a little bit of a challenge to work in just because of the terrain. We've got all of these cliffs and whatnot. But I really don't need a ton of space, so it's not necessarily that I'm worried about. It's the fact that I need to put this on a train, and my train line is down here. It's also over here on this side, but I don't really want to connect it to that side because it needs to make its way over to the Dune Desert, so it makes a whole lot more sense to connect it over here. I think it's going to be time for another spiral. This right here looks like it's probably enough space to branch off and be able to add a spiral, and then that'll get me up to this height. The last thing I want to do is build my factory and then realize that I need more space for my train, because trains can just be awkward. Because if I've learned one thing about this game, is that trains always take up more space than you think you will. So I think getting the train station knocked out first, and then building the factory where I have free space, is the better way to go. The spacing ended up being a little bit tighter than I wanted. Go figure. So we've got our 3-way intersection, which also immediately starts ramping up, which is not something I normally do. But like I said, not as much space as I was hoping. And then we immediately go into our spiral. Now, the nice thing is, it didn't really have to be all that tall, but it is a great way to basically go vertical in a pretty small amount of space. The spiral then comes up to here, and then it branches off. The incoming part of the train is going to go that way into the back, dock at the train station, and then this is its way back out to the main train line. Only one train is ever going to stop here because this is only going to be for this copper powder. I don't plan on using this train station for anything else, so there should only ever be one train that comes here. With the train station out of the way, now we can place some machines again. I'm just going to need to change the numbers up again, but I can thankfully just reuse my same 4 foundries into 2 constructor blueprint. I need a total of 16 foundries, so just 4 of these blueprints. And for these, I don't really need a whole lot of space on the outside. Just do some mergers there. So let's go ahead and try to bring everything nice and close to the middle. Just need one more row of foundations on that side. These foundries are going to create 3,720 ingots. I'm using 16 machines, 232.5, and that's how much each one of them needs. And if each one of these is going to output 232.5, that means I've got 465 going into each one of these constructors. So to do that, we do 465 divided by the default rate of 300 and multiply this by 100 for the percentage of 155. Each one will produce 77.5. So the reason I'm able to put these this close is I only need each side to be able to feed half. So there's going to be one set of splitters there and one set of there. 1 iron and 1 copper will get fed in from this side, and then the other iron and the other copper node will get fed in from this side. And that's this factory. It's as simple as that. Compared to all of the other options you have, you do have to love how compact the copper alloy ingot alt recipe is. It is a bit more convenient than placing all of those refineries. Well, I can't leave it like this. Let me spend a little time doing some decorating, and then we'll get this powered on. Welcome back. The new copper powder and train station are all finished. Let me take you on a quick little tour and let's get it turned on. 3 of the nodes are plugging in underneath the factory right here, but the other one is just snaking around the train station. This section right here is exactly why I built the train line first and then the factory. I could have pushed the factory farther back and then I wouldn't have had to deal with this, and the roof would have just been normal. But honestly, I kind of like having to switch things up every once in a while. This factory ended up being pretty small, to be honest, for making almost 4,000 copper ingots and turning it all into copper powder. I didn't really want to make the factory any bigger, so instead of adding on an additional foundation, like I normally would in most of my bigger factories, I just added the catwalk all the way around, so they do just go over the mergers, and that way I could keep this factory just a little bit smaller. I thought about having the same train that's going out to the Spire Coast come over here, and I'm pretty sure it would have had plenty of time to do the whole round trip, but instead I'm just going to have this be its own train, and if we go into the timetable, we are at the Northern Forest Copper Powder Pickup, and I have it set for the freight wagon is fully loaded. So this will only leave when there's a full 32 stacks available. 32 stacks, I stacked to 500. This will have 620 per minute going in there, so its round trip is going to be just under 26 minutes. That means it'll be waiting here for quite a bit, but because of this intersection and I know it's going to kind of slow down trains, I just figured it would be best if it just ran as little as possible. All of the miners are set to 930 ore. The only thing left to do is power them on. And just like that, it's up to 100%. Gotta love the simple factories. So this train is already on and working, and it's just waiting for the 32 stacks to be available. Then it'll do the docking animation, and then it'll come back and it'll end up waiting for another 10-15 minutes before it can take off again. When it does finally take off, it'll be docking here at Dune Desert 0. And it is the 3rd freight platform. And this is where the reanimated SAM, the time crystals, and that copper powder are going to go. To balance 250, I went the easy route and just added a splitter. So we've got the 270 on the Mark III coming out of the container. And then I have a Mark I and a Mark III. So this should stay full, and that would be 60. Split that into thirds, I'll loop back 20, group everything back up, and now I've got 250 on here. The 160 with storage was actually a blueprint that I had already made for a previous video, so luckily for me, I just got to reuse that one. And then I just made a new one for the 620 copper powder. And with this one, I went another easy route and went with the smart splitter. This one has the priority over to the right, and so that will force 480 onto this belt. If I split that into thirds, I've got 160. 780 minus the 160 is the 620 that I need. Regroup everything else up, and it heads off on its way. And the great thing about having this as a blueprint is now I can just slap down another one of these. Should be about right there. Because this very last one is going to be picking up 160 plastic. So I just need to get that connected to the storage and then get that connected to the sink here. And I can go back over to the West Coast and get that 160 plastic put on a train. Here we are back at the West Coast, and it just keeps getting longer and longer. I have added on another train station. We are now up to rubber plastic 7, and I decided to change my mind. I know I just said that it was going to be the 4th freight platform that was going to do plastic. But because the second one over there is only dealing with 160 time crystals per minute, and those stacked to 200, I could easily drop off a second product at that same freight platform. Just use a smart splitter to split them, obviously. But that same freight platform can easily handle both of those products. My thinking is, why make the train even longer than it needs to be? I can keep it a little bit shorter this way. I've already taken care of the load balancing. We've got the 160 headed into the train. And for that, let's just follow it all the way back. Before coming over here, I had 334 plastic just being sent to the sink. I just went up and over, and then added this load balancer. Out of this side, I've got my 160 that's going to the train. And on this side, we've got the 174 that's headed to the sink. And if we just go up through the foundation here, you can double check. That's how much is going in there. Perfect. Well, I think. And that is the last of the missing pieces that I didn't have available in the Dune Desert. Now I'm going to go ahead and take my portal here, head back, and all that's really left, the good old decoration and power phase. The save is currently at 550 hours and 11 minutes. Surely I didn't forget anything major, and I'll be back in no time. Welcome back, my new Singularity Cell factory. The save is currently at 570 hours and 40 minutes. As we can see the original Singularity Cell factory off in this distance, that one's making a whopping 50, which did get me pretty far. This one is going to be outputting 160 per minute. And yes, you probably did your math right. It took me over 20 hours to get to this point. And I did kind of allude to it. I was kind of forgetting about a major part of it. And actually I got through decorating probably half of the factory before I remembered about the pipes. This factory requires a fair amount of water. And instead of just doing a normal set of pipes all the way down there, I thought this would just be so much more fun. There's a decent chance I probably could have found enough water down below, but it gave me an excuse to do this. And if you're curious about how I made these, I have a whole separate video because I figured that would just be the easiest way, and then I could go into a little bit more detail about it. But these are blueprints, and with the blueprint auto connect, these things work like a charm. So I have both a horizontal version and a vertical version. And when it comes to transitioning from one to the other, I just play around with the nudge and try to get them into decent spots to make it look as smooth as possible, although you could probably come up with some other ideas. But I think there's probably some other ways. You could probably use some beams to kind of create a band around there to cover up the kind of jagged edge of it, and I'm sure someone could make that look good. I don't know if I could. Or another comment was kind of covering up the transition in foundations, kind of like I did at the very bottom here where it just ends there. You could probably cover it and make it look more or less like a beam connector, and that would hide a lot of that jaggedness. But from a distance, I don't think it's too bad. And thankfully, it worked on the first try. I made sure that I powered on all the water extractors ahead of time, and once I powered on the machines, it's really easy to make sure that you can go through. If each one of these has water, that means that all of the pipes should be working, in theory. So to get all of the pipes out of here, the pipeline floor holes don't necessarily place nicely on these. You've got free form, but then it also looks like that. So the way I did it is I grabbed a 2-meter foundation and I just zooped that down. And then in the correct spots, I grabbed the floor hole. The small concrete pillar and a 2-meter foundation are going to be the exact same width. So now I just need to nudge it up by 2 meters. Place that there. When I delete my foundations, there it is. And if we come to the very end, I'll show you what the inside of the pipe looks like. So even though it's a little bit more work, the nice thing about this is you can just delete things and then easily just fill the holes back in. If we come inside, this is what the very end of it looks like. This one is the very last water pipe. If we head all the way back, it'll just start to get busier and busier. So basically, they just each peel off. So I had to start with the middle one, and then I just kept a pattern. I just went left, right, until you run out of one whole level, and then you move on to the next one. And then you go center, left, right, until eventually I am all out of pipes. Each one of those pipes do have a pump at the very top to get them up into this giant pipe that I'm using to transport everything. But after that, it's pretty much just using gravity to feed it the rest of the way. Oh yeah, and I decided since this should be the last factory out here, it was probably time to decorate the normal train station as well. So instead of it being a giant open floating platform, it finally has walls and a roof. I don't know why I had never thought about doing this before, but instead of using actual windows, I just stacked a whole bunch of the gate hole walls, because those are kind of like the frame walls, and you know, stacking them on each other, they actually kind of look like windows, but I can fly straight through them, which is handy. And I'm sure you could all guess, these are of course blueprints. It's really handy for projects like this where it takes up a decent amount of space, and if you're going to place it over and over again, it really does save some time. So down here I have some vents, and then I just swap those out for windows on the actual train floor. And if we come inside, it looks like most of my train stations. The main difference is this actually has 2 different push-pulls coming here. So that one is going to the top of the cliffs to grab all of that sulfur, SAM, and uranium. And this train is making its way out to that first Singularity Tower. I've got all my hyper tubes, and I've added a new one to take me over to the Singularity Cells Factory 2. Oh, might as well just hop in. And we pop out right here on the first floor where most of the copper powder is being made. A lot of the belts are going from down below up to the top floor from here. Except for all the way over there, it just made sense to have the concrete ones go up through the floor there. I so rarely add lights to the ceiling, and every time I do, I think I should probably do this more often. It really does help lighten up the room. I'm sorry, last one. So these are of course blueprints. I am just utilizing a bunch of the large billboards and then just some inverted ramps. Then we have the top floor, because this is much cleaner than underneath, so we'll save that for last. I decided to just leave this as an open factory instead of putting a roof on it. Part of the reason is I added this giant diagonal as part of the build, and it does make things a little bit more complicated, and sometimes I struggle to be creative. With the amount of particle accelerators, I'm happy to leave this one out in the open because I love seeing those things run. It is kind of a shame there's no quantum encoders here, but I think this factory is going to use up plenty of power all on its own. To use up some of this space, I just filled it in with more of the walkway that goes all the way around. So now let's jump in the elevator and head down into the depths of the basement. Alright, well, the logistics area got a little bit busier. On the other side of this wall is that belt highway that's coming from the train station. So I've added signs for everything that's coming in. So green means it's coming in, red means it's going out, which definitely means that sulfur should be green. There we go. Only the Singularity Cells are headed back to the train station. Since we've got 2 sushi belts, that means we've got a couple of different smart splitters. This one is splitting off the sulfur, the limestone, and then everything else goes to the right. So this sulfur is, I believe, the 300. Yep, the 300. So that goes all the way to that end, and that plugs directly into the very last set of refineries. The limestone then heads off this way and goes all the way back to the very back corner. And then the rest of it comes right here, where we then split off the pressure conversion cubes and then the reanimated SAM. But the reanimated SAM is coming from 2 different places, so that's where the other one is getting grouped up from. And that's really just because of the amounts. This amount all fit, and this amount all fit. I probably could have swapped things around to get all of the reanimated SAM together at the train station. I'll be completely honest, I don't really remember why I ended up splitting it up like this. It really doesn't matter if we do it over there or we do it over here. This sushi belt has the rest of the reanimated SAM that gets split off. And then the plastic, the trigons, and the copper powder then get split up. And this is where I do my balancing for all the copper powder. So as you'll remember, one of these belts has like 1080. This belt is going to have 620. And then these are 2 amounts that are somewhere in the middle. But what I want is 4 completely equal belts. So this is my 4-to-4 belt balancer. Plug 4 belts of any amount in, and I'll get 4 completely even belts out. Those copper powder belts will head this way, and then they head all the way up to the top floor. The rest of the floor looks kind of chaotic because I did need to get things from one place all the way to the other, so I did need to use a whole bunch of lifts, but it's organized chaos. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. With the copper and the iron, it actually ended up being easier than I anticipated. I knew the belts of 900 would be really easy, but getting belts of 780, I wasn't exactly sure how easy that was going to be. But it turns out, it's not actually that bad. It just looks crazy because of how much stuff is going on in here. But an easy way to get to 780 would be 600 plus 180. The belts of 600, really easy to get based on how much is coming from the nodes, right? And getting belts of 180, also pretty easy, because if I can get a belt of 900, that shouldn't be too bad, and I divide that by 5, I can get 5 belts of 180. So that's what I did. I bring in a belt of 900, and then that goes into the merger, the splitter, and then we've got the 3 there, the 3 here, which one of them loops back to the first merger. Good old 5-way split. So for the foundries, I needed 4 belts of each of the ores at 780. And then back here is where the refineries are getting plugged in, and these ones just needed belts of 900. Most of those are coming from the train, because that's where I got to bring in the belts of 1200. Except for the train station may look a little bit bigger than it did last time. It didn't have walls before, but if you were thinking that it had more than just 1 belt worth of a gap in between this wall to get over to this area and the very last miner, you would be correct, because this station had to grow a little bit, and I got lucky that it was just big enough. So here's the last part that added a little bit of time. I needed to double the size of this train. It was so incredibly close to having enough time, but the round trip time on this thing was off by probably less than 5 seconds. Like, it was really, really close. It would keep up for a number of cycles, and then finally there would be a stack that it wouldn't be able to pick up. But it would take a good amount of time before that finally happened. And since this is a push-pull system, I've kind of locked myself into just making the train bigger, because I can't really add a second train. Well, not easily. That's not something I want to do. Just making the train bigger is really the best option. Which meant that I needed to make this train station a little bit longer, and I needed to redo just the very end of it. I got to keep the large majority of the tracks exactly the same. And I did think about trying to redo the tracks to shave off a little bit of time to see if maybe then the train would make the round trip. And that may have worked, but the way I saw it is it would still be really tight on the timing, and I would just feel much more confident about everything if I just didn't try to cut the timing that close. So extending the train, as painful if it was to do, was just the better option. So this train station has now doubled in size. Even though it really doesn't need to now, I just left it on the wait till it's fully loaded, because all of the freight cars are receiving the ores at the exact same rate. They'll all fill up at the exact same time, but now that it has plenty of time, I could have switched it back. A few of the pure nodes just had to get split up, so we've got the full belt, and then we just split them in between the two platforms. But pretty straightforward. Every once in a while, it's good to reinforce the reasons why you do things. Getting the trains turned on earlier to make sure that the throughput is good is why I try to do that earlier in the build than when I'm in my decorating and power phase. I really thought that this was going to be fine because it's just right there. It doesn't have that far to go. But it turns out it's just far enough, and I really wish that I would turn this on sooner. Thankfully for this, it really wasn't the end of the world. But I had already decorated all of it, so then you have to chop off a whole wall, extend everything, and it just feels like a more efficient use of my time if I can catch those issues early. And I think that about covers everything. I know I have a ton of sinks all over the place, and I'm going to delete them, I guess, in stages basically. Because some of them, like the ones up at the very top here, these are for the concrete, because I'm going to get the concrete running, and that gets produced at such a high rate, it would fill up all of the manufacturers well before everything else shows up. Especially the pasta. It's not fast food. The first thing I'm going to get sent in is just the sulfur. That's going to get all of these refineries turned on, and I want to get to the point where all of these pipes are completely full. Once the pipes are full, these refineries are going to end up shutting off, and so just to keep all of the belts moving, especially because one of the sulfur belts is coming on a sushi belt, I have some sinks set up for the overflow for the sulfur. Once I get the copper sent in, that will turn on all of these refineries, and then I'll be able to turn off those sinks once these are up and running at 100%. I guess one last thing, I've never done this, which is really pretty simple, but I just basically spaced out a bunch of frame walls 1 meter stacked on top of each other. So if I clip one on top and then just nudge it 3 meters down, I thought it gave it kind of a cool look as just a different wall that I haven't used before. Okay, now I think that's everything. If you couldn't tell, this project took a little while and I think my brain is a little fried. But let's hurry up and get this started before I start rambling on about something else. Like I just said, I'm only going to do the sulfur first. So I'm going to queue up this smart splitter and sink, and then I'm going to go to the other side of the factory and queue up that one. And by that one, I mean these two. So this one has limestone, sulfur, and reanimated sand. So a little bit of the concrete will get started, but I already have smart splitters set up for that. And same with the reanimated SAM. I think I forgot to show that off, but there is a sink there, so when the dark matter residue pipes are completely full, I'll just start sinking the reanimated SAM, and then I'll make sure that this sushi belt doesn't back up. Once the factory is up and running, I can delete those extra ones. Let's start the stopwatch. Down to the last two refineries, waiting for them to back up. This one won't take long to back up now. We're pretty much there, so let's start queuing up all the rest of the sinks. It's a good thing you can select up to 50 things at once. Alright, so that is almost everything. The last thing I'm going to have to do is flip the switch on these miners that are down here. So I've already turned them on and then I just switched them off. And that way they'll just spring to life automatically. I won't have to wait the 10 seconds. I'm still waiting for the nuclear pasta to get up to 100%, but the dark matter crystal's already up to 100%. So what I can do to kind of clear this out is I just switch it so both of them are any, and then we'll just see this line slowly start to clear out. And once it clears out all the way to the machine, then I can just delete this. Throughput monitor is almost reading the 16 that I'm looking for, which means there's a little bit of lag time, and now we've built up a little bit of a buffer. There's probably like 5 or 6 in each of these machines. So I can go ahead and get this last part started now. The dark matter crystals have plenty of wiggle room, so I'm just going to go ahead and send those in now. I've got both the plastic and the iron plates on a sushi bell here, and then this smart splitter is just going to split them off. Plastic will go to the top, iron ingots will stay on the bottom, and we are going to get plates in no time. And let's go ahead and send in the concrete. And there they are. Not the first Singularity Cells of the save, but this is a big jump up in production. You know, that really didn't take too long to get up to the 160 per minute. Now let's go over to the train station where the sink is. And it just took a minute for the 160 to show up over here. In the past, the sink points were really bursty because the pressure conversion cubes would get all dropped off at once, and then they would just go into a sink. Once I built this factory, then I actually load balanced the 16. And so everything has been much smoother. And before I turned this on, it looks like I was getting 18 to 20. And now we've jumped up to 35, 37, 37.9. 37.5. All right, I'll take it. That is a good increase. Looks like we're staying above 37 million now. That is awesome. That is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for being here. And a special thank you to everyone that likes, comments, and hypes the videos. It really does help. My world is now producing 210 Singularity Cells per minute, which is certainly more than I need, but I also like seeing the amount of sync points go up, and these are worth a good amount. I was hoping that this was the last major part I was missing so that I could build the Ballistic Warp Drive factory in the next video. When I took inventory of the other parts I'll be bringing in by train, I realized I don't have enough aluminum, plastic, or rubber. So I'll be building new factories and train stations for those in the next one. And then it'll be time for that final factory. Look forward to that. And thanks for watching.